Hello everyone, it's Callie here again, and I've got another game of GLC for you. It's another fighting versus psychic matchup, but this time it's damage spread psychic that makes use of the loss zone. Both players really give it their all in this match, and it's an amazing game that you won't want to miss. All the games I cast are filmed at Gubu Hobby, where I run a weekly GLC league. If you happen to be in the Metro Atlanta area, come check us out on Saturdays. And if you do like the content, please be sure you give it a like, subscribe, and definitely leave a comment down below. That said, let's get into the game. All right, got another exciting game of Psychic versus Fighting. This time it is Lost Zone Psychic versus Fighting. Gonna see how this matchup goes. See if weakness comes into play or resistance. Again, since it is Lost Zone, that is mostly spreading damage counters for the Psychic player, probably not going to be hitting for weakness, but resistance could be relevant. Does look like our fighting player mulligans at least one time. But this game is going to get underway in just a moment. Going to be a very exciting matchup. Lost Zone is a very interesting mechanic, especially in GLC. So for anybody that doesn't know how that works, anytime you put something in a Lost Zone, it's kind of similar to Exile or something like that from Magic the Gathering, where it's a zone separate from your discard pile that you can't really access. Unlike in something like Magic, where there are things that can recover things from Exile, there isn't a way in Pokemon to be able to get things back from the Lost Zone. So in a singleton format like GLC, where you only have one copy of cards in your deck, as soon as you Lost Zone it, that is your one copy just completely gone. Can make it very difficult to make certain decisions, but at the same time, does allow you to activate powerful attackers like that Lost Mine Sableye. I already see that in our Psychic player's hand. I'm going up to 3 mulligans. Not a great start for our fighting player. Always not really ever good to mulligan in general, but especially in a situation where you're going up against a deck that's potentially hitting you for weakness. And also has resistance against you as well. See if our fighting player mulligans a 4th time, or if they finally are able to find a basic Pokemon. So far, not looking good. All right, there we go. Okay, so we do got the Riolu. Only 3 mulligans. Looks like our Psychic player does opt to just take 2 of those, actually. They don't want all 3. So drawing extra cards. Game is underway. We got Psychic versus Fighting. Riolu in the active versus the Chimchar. This Chimchar, another also interesting attacker from our Psychic player. Starting off really fast with that Pokestop. Chorus Experiment going to the discard. Not what our Psychic player wanted to see. Do get Enhanced Hammer out of that, though. Will be helpful against the Okidogi potentially later on. Okidogi, a very powerful attacker. If you're able to get a Dark Energy on, it can do 170 damage for only 2 Fighting Energy. If you use something like a Luminous Energy or a Unit Energy, or really any myriad of Rainbow Energies, it will allow you to do 170 with a Pokemon that's got 230 HP. Second player is playing lots of cards in Japanese, so it looks like he does have some references on hand for our fighting player. Not surprised that our fighting player doesn't know what this Chimchar does. Basically, it does 10 damage, and then your opponent can't play any Pokemon with abilities from their hand on their next turn. So no basics, no evolutions, nothing with an ability. Pokestop being a little bit kinder to our fighting player, though they would have really liked that Brooklet Hill. Gonna get Pokeball instead. Looking at that Battle Compressor is the card that they want to discard. Gonna be able to find a basic Pokemon. They do have the Hisuian Arcanine in their hand, so might opt for Growlithe, but probably will be searching for a different Pokemon instead. That Growlithe is really, or the Arcanine is really only helpful if your Pokemon have damage counters on them. So you want something like your Donphan or something else that can hit your bench to help power that up. Does opt for Okidogi instead. Professor's Letter going down to be able to find some energies. Okidogi a good choice here, especially after having read that Chimchar's attack. Wouldn't have been able to play that next turn if that is the attack that our Psychic player winds up using. Does get 2 fighting energies from the Professor Letter. One of those will probably go down in the Okie Dokie to start powering that up so you can start hitting really hard with it, hopefully the turn after. Looks like our fighting player has that special Halloween stamped Okie Dokie. That's from the Trick or Trade packs that came out this year. Glad to see some actually good cards in those packs. Those are very fun for kids especially, but it's always still nice to see a couple cards that, you might actually want to put in your deck show up too. It's got a cool hollow pattern with a nice stamp on it as well. Gets another fighting energy from that energy lotto. Debating where to put this fighting energy. Not sure if they want to put it on the Riolu and use that detect or jab, or if they just want to put it on Okie Dokie. Looks like our fighting player is opting for the Riolu, and I think they're activating detect. So they will flip a coin. If they get heads, they will not be able to be damaged next turn, assuming that again is the tech that they used. Or maybe I'm misremembering that because it does look like the player did pick up their deck there. Maybe they're just shuffling. No, opts for jab instead. Okay, so it doesn't go for the detect. So I guess they are just shuffling. Pokestop. Couple more Pokemon. This Pokestop not being kind to our psychic player at all. Esper and that bench barrier, Mr. Mime, going to the discard. Not sure if our fighting player is playing anything like Tinglu or any kind of spread damage, so that Mr. Mime may not be relevant in this particular matchup. Does play that Buddy Buddy Puffin. Going to be able to find 2 basic Pokemon with 7 HP or left. Comfey, one of the most obvious choices in this situation. Might go for that Duskull as well. That will allow our Lost Zone player to start potentially evolving that into the powerful Dusknoir. Dusknoir allows you to use its ability, put 130 damage on one of your opponent's Pokemon, allowing you to, in most cases, probably take a prize. It does KO the Pokemon, so your opponent does take a prize, but typically you're able to, obviously take out 2 Pokemon in that one turn, so you go up 2 versus 1 down, be able to take out 2 very powerful Pokemon that they probably didn't want you to be able to take out that turn. Is what our Lost Zone player is opting for, so has that Comfey, has that Duskull, so probably not going to use this Chimchow's attack this turn. They are likely going to retreat into this Comfey. They need to start getting their Lost Zone going. They ideally would have liked to have started that last turn, but having discarded their Colress and not be able to get their Comfey down, they were not able to get that going. So see if they are able to do that. Oh, I guess that is the energy that gives them -2 retreat cost, so is able to retreat for free. Uses that flower selecting, Lost Vacuum, and a Fog Crystal. Ooh, tough choice here. Lost Vacuum can get rid of a lot of very powerful stadiums or tool cards that your opponent is using while also helping you power up your own Lost Zone, or you could just keep it yourself and get rid of your own Pokestop to power it up even further. That looks like what our player might be opting for. Fog Crystal does go to the Lost Zone. See if our player decides to use that Lost Vacuum on their own Pokestop this turn. So far, it's helping their opponent a lot more than them. Lots of options in this Lost Zone deck. Does use the switch card. Going to be able to use this attack, stop our opponent from being able to play any Pokemon with abilities on their next turn. Things like Evo Soda can get around that because it plays it from the deck. But if the fighting player doesn't have something like that, they'll just be stuck with this Riolu still down. Plays Clara, gets the Mr. Mime and the Esper. See if they opt to put down that Mr. Mime, or if they're just going to keep it as maybe discard fodder. Really will come down to whether or not our psychic player thinks this deck is playing any spread. Opting for a Horror Energy going on down this Chimchao. So that, if it is damage from an attack, it will do 20 damage back. So using that first attack does hit for weakness. It's 20 damage on Riolu. Cannot play any ability Pokemon from their hand this turn. Going to keep them from being able to evolve into Lucario. Going to keep them from putting down things like Drillbur and any other basic Pokemon with abilities that they might have. Thankfully for our fighting player, there's not a lot of basics that have abilities. It's kind of one of the weaknesses of fighting. It doesn't have a lot of good basic support Pokemon. Honestly, it doesn't have a lot of good support Pokemon in general. Oh, does have Evo Soda. That is going to allow our player to go into that Lucario. Again, that is playing it from the deck, not from the hand, so gets around that Chimchow's attack. Lucario in play is going to be able to accelerate in energy and potentially take a knockout this turn. Again, that ability allows you to go search your deck for a fighting energy, attach it to that Lucario. It does take some damage, but then it will have the 2 fighting that it needs. Ooh, opting to attach for turn instead of use that ability. Nope. Does opt for the ability instead. So again, going to be able to get that fighting energy. Know they've got another fighting energy in hand, so they can go ahead and power up one of their Pokemon. Uses that Pokestop, finds 2 item cards. Again, this Pokestop being a lot more helpful for our fighting player than for our psychic player. I feel like that's what always happens whenever I play Pokestop. It's way more helpful for my opponent than it is for me. Attaches another energy for turn, so ultimately decides not to use that ability, or at least is saving it for now. Goes with the Explorer's Guidance. Very interesting deck here for our fighting player. This lets you look at the top 6 cards of your deck. You get to keep 2 of them. The rest goes to your discard. So again, this fighting player is definitely playing some kind of interesting fighting deck that wants to get cards in their discard. So can't really see which cards they are deciding on here. I think all I really saw in their hand was a Phanpy. Looks like Switch, Course, Tenacity, Random Receiver, and Phanpy all going to the discard. Did our player have any other cards they want to be able to play this turn that they were grabbing off that Explorer's Guidance? So they are debating what they want to do next. That Phanpy would have been a great Pokemon to be able to get down right now. Looks like they are just opting for the Aura Sphere Volley. Gonna have to discard those energies, but does allow them to take the KO. Does take 20 back from that Horror Energy. Up comes Comfy, gonna be able to get another card in the Lost Zone this turn. Put our player at least 2. Going with that Pokestop. Gladion going to the discard, but does get the Ultra Ball. Looks like our player is wondering, what the heck is that card? I'm actually not totally sure what that card is either. That's not an art I'm familiar with, or a card I'm familiar with. So we'll see what that does later when our psychic player plays it. But Pokestop finally doing some favors here for our psychic player. They actually find a couple items, don't lose anything too horrible here. We obviously don't know what the psychic player's prizes are, so that Gladion might have been helpful for them, but they could potentially get it back later. Gonna discard or put that level ball in the Lost Zone and keep that Bucephalon. So that Bucephalon is another way to spread damage counters, though it does require your opponent to be on a certain number of prizes. I believe it's 3 prizes to be able to actually activate that. Good attacker once your opponent has started to take some prizes. Typically as Lost Zone, you are playing from behind. Usually as spread decks, not really that bad for you to have a couple KOs happen on your opponent's side. So it looks like our psychic player is debating if they want to do anything else. They haven't attached for turn, so they could still power something up. Definitely be really good for them if they could go ahead and get 1 more energy in play. Might want to put that down on that Bucephalon so that it is a little bit closer to being able to attack her later on in the game. That Esper is not typically used as an attacker. The evolution allows you to get supporters back from your discard. Does put a psychic energy down and then plays Ultra Ball. Might be looking for, I would guess, probably the Indeedee. They do need to get their Course Experiment back. They need to start powering up that Lost Zone. Looks like that Mr. Mime is being used as discard fodder. Then goes that whistle that I'm not sure what that card is. So won't have to find out what that does this game. See if our player opts for the evolution of that Dusclops or if they're going to go for the Indeedee. We do see that Dusclops in the deck, so that is an option. I don't see the Indeedee, so that might be in the prizes. Or I think I actually might have seen it when they shifted through. There it is. Oh, nope, they do opt for the Dusclops. So this, again, can explode itself. It puts out 50 damage on one Pokemon. Again, does knock itself out, so your opponent takes a prize. But a great way to be able to potentially get this Okidogi if it doesn't get a Darkness Energy on it next turn. If you're able to go into that Dusknoir, doing 130, which is perfect for this Okidogi. But we will wait and see if our Psychic player is able to do that. They do have Tulip, going to allow them to recover some of those Pokemon they've lost to their discard. Don't think they really have too much in there at the moment, but if their Comfey does manage to get KO'd, they can still do that. Hex Maniac going down, shutting off all abilities. That's going to make it a lot harder for our fighting player to be able to actually power up this Lucario or the Okidogi this turn. Can't use any abilities. Drillbur also can't use its ability because of that Hex Maniac. Drillbur allows you to search your deck for fighting energies and discard them. Good way to be able to get those into discard for things like Raihan, which can let you accelerate energies back into play. But again, not helpful for our fighting player here because of Hex Maniac. Hex Maniac shuts off all abilities for the rest of your turn and then all of your opponent's next turn. Basically, until you take your next turn, all abilities are shut off. Luminous Energy going down on that Okidogi. So while the ability is shut off at the moment, it will be reactivated on the Psychic player's turn. They do have Enhanced Hammer in their hand, so if they are able to evolve into Dusknoir, they can still potentially KO this Okidogi. Get Field Blower, and then an energy as well as another card go to the discard. Looks like our player is potentially debating if they want to use that Field Blower. Unfortunately, at this point for them, there's only the Pokestop in play. Not the best target to really waste that Field Blower on. Might want to save that for later, though I don't think Lost Zone really plays that many tools. Probably plays things like Floatstone just because why wouldn't you run Floatstone? It's just so powerful. But outside of that, there's not too many tools that are really helping it. Oscar Ordinary Rod, probably going to get that Phanpy and potentially 2 fighting energy, maybe just 1, depending on how many energies our fighting player wants in the discard. Looks like they opt for, I think that is 2 fighting in the Phanpy. It's a little hard to see there. It's kind of done off camera. It's not going to shuffle using the Karina. I always like to say that some players are always like, oh yeah, this is Irida for fighting. I always like to say that Irida is Karina for water. Because Karina came first. Allows you to find a fighting Pokemon as well as an item card. Wonder if our player will go ahead and grab that Phanpy, or if they might go for something like the Hisuian Growlithe. Looks like they are opting for the Growlithe. That Arcanine, a very powerful attacker. If any of your Pokemon on the bench have damage, it can use its first attack for free and attack for 120. 120 is not too bad in this format, and attacking for free is very good. Does opt for that escape rope. Wanting a way to get this Lucario out of the active. Might save that to play it next turn. But at least for now, they do want a way to be able to get this Lucario out of the active. It has got that 2 retreat cost, so it is hard to retreat it. That will allow them to potentially go up with the Okidogi or something else next turn and take a KO. They do pass. I think our Psychic player did just top deck the Indeedee, which is a perfect grab for them. Gets that Palpad. Ooh, Dusknoir going to the discard along with that Mew. But they do get Palpad. Absolutely love that Palpad art. I feel like it's one of the millions of examples of where Japan keeps all the really cool stuff for themselves. I don't believe we've ever gotten that art printed in English. I don't know, something about it. Just kind of like how it looks there. Looks like our player is opting for the Pal Pad. Lots of good supporters in the discard to be able to shuffle back into the deck. If they don't have a way to recover Colress, they might go ahead and put that back in. Hexmaniac, another good choice for them as well. Looks like In and Colress Experiment are the two cards that are going to go back in. Player not shuffling just yet. Might have some other cards they want to play first. Is opting for that Indeedee. So yeah, this is it's actually not from the discard. There's so many different cards, and it's not Indeedee. It's Meowskit. I always forget those two Pokemon. Like for whatever reason, for me, are just so similar. I always get them confused. I've been calling it the wrong thing this whole time. But it does let you go get supporters from your deck. So gonna get that Colress and In right back out. Don't believe a supporter's been played this turn, so gonna be able to play that Colress. Probably not gonna opt for the In. Their hand seems pretty strong, and also wouldn't want to shuffle away that Colress after they just worked so hard to get it back. Colress is a great card for building up your Lost Zone. Lets you look at the top 5 cards of your deck. You keep 3 of those to go to the Lost Zone. So not only are you getting a good choice of cards, but you are again powering up that Lost Zone. So there is a Floatstone. Looks like Guzma, Professor's Letter, Artisan being chosen. Sorry, not Artisan. Arvin still has a choice of one other card. Looks like debating between that Guzma and that Floatstone. This is actually a really tough choice. This is what I was saying earlier when it comes to Lost Zone decks. You're forced to make some very tough choices. Really want that Guzma, really want that Floatstone. Honestly, probably want all of those cards. Put them in your deck. You only get one copy of them. There's nothing in GLC that you're probably running. You're like, I don't really care about this all that much. Is opting for the Guzma. Oh no, those are what are going to the Lost Zone. Okay, so Arvin and Guzma both going to the Lost Zone. Using that Professor's Letter, going to get 2 energies from the deck. Still can't use this Bucephalon's attack or their Sableye. Only 4 in the Lost Zone at the moment. Don't believe they've used Comfy this turn, so they can get up to 5, but they're still a long ways away from being able to use this Sableye. We also know that Dusknoir is in the discard, so unless our player has a way to recover that, it's going to be difficult for them to recover that. Echoing Horn and Random Receiver. Looks like Random Receiver going back does want to keep that Echoing Horn to potentially put a Pokemon back on the bench to win the game later on. Our player still does have the option to potentially use their own Lost Vacuum to get rid of Pokestop. That will allow them to get up to 7, because they will Lost Zone the card that they use with the Lost Vacuum, and then Pokestop will go there as well. But they might want to keep this Pokestop for a little bit longer. Enhanced Hammer, getting rid of that Luminous energy. Does the player have a way to go into that Dusclops? They do. They've got the Rescue Stretcher. Here comes the Dusknoir. They're evolving into that. They're going to be able to blow it up, do 130 damage to that Ogie Dogie. Boom. There we go. So both players going to get to take a prize here. That puts them at 4-5. But Ogie Dogie goes down. Very good play here from our Psychic player. Trainer's Mail, going to allow them to get a trainer, or look at the top 4 and get a trainer there. It's like I see Field Blower and Scoop Up Net. I don't think I saw any other trainers there as an option, so we'll see what our Psychic player offers. Oh, they do have the Acrobike. Or is that Bicycle? Not totally sure from that art. Both look obviously very similar to each other. Bicycle lets you draw until you've got 4 cards in your hand, while Acrobike lets you look at the top 2 and discard 1. Be more likely that you'd be playing Acrobike in this deck. You typically have a lot of cards when you're playing Lost Zone decks between Colress and Comfy, so you are unlikely to be able to do that. It does look like it's an Acrobike, choosing between that Banette and Scoop Up Net. See if our which one of those our player will opt to discard. Since they don't have the Shuppet down, it may be better to just get rid of that. They can potentially recover it later. Does opt for Scoop Up Net. But net, another way to accelerate that loss zone. You can use its ability to get a supporter back, and then the Banette and the Shuppet both go to your loss zone. Getting that Duskull as well as the Chimchao back with that Rescue Stretcher. Potentially going to be powering that back up to be able to use that Dusclops all over again. We're seeing that card all over the place in Standard. Apparently can't escape it in GLC either. Looks like going up with that Chimchao, retreating with the free retreat on that Comfy. So going to do another 20 damage, and no ability Pokemon can be played from the hand this turn. So if they are able to recover Okidogi, they won't be able to put it back down. Doesn't stop them from playing their Arcanine or their Excadrill. Neither one of those have abilities. Fighting again, a pretty ability light type. Many of its abilities are on stage 2 Pokemon, making it very difficult to actually get into those consistently, especially since fighting doesn't have a lot of ways to accelerate specifically into its stage 2s. Opting for that escape rope, up comes the Meowskit, and here comes the Hisuian Growlithe. Do they have the Arcanine? They do. They're going to be able to take a KO this turn thanks to that Proud Fangs. Lucario did damage itself earlier, or it's been hit by the Chimchao a few times. Excadrill also going down. Very easy Pokemon to attack with. It's a 140 HP stage 1 that can potentially do 120 damage for only 1 energy. Do have to discard the top 4 cards of your deck, but can definitely be worth it. Opting for that Pokestop another time, paying off again, though does lose the Phanpy. Potentially can recover it with that Night Stretcher, though might not be the choice that they want to make. Okidogi would probably be the more likely choice of what they will grab. Also has Nest Ball to be able to get a Pokemon out of the deck. Oh no, does opt for the Phanpy with the Rescue Stretcher. Guess they're going to value Donphan a little bit more here. Donphan, another powerful attacker. That Earthquake does 120 damage. Does put 20 damage on all of your benched Pokemon, but it attacks for only 1 energy. That 20 damage is very helpful when you've got your Hisuian Arcanine. Having damage counters on everything means that you will always be able to use that Proud Fangs. See if our player decides to use that Nest Ball. I'm not sure if they really have very many more Pokemon left in their deck. We know Okidogi's in the discard, and they've got plenty of other Pokemon in play. Does use Proud Fangs. Goes down to only 3 prizes remaining. Up comes Comfy, so we're going to be able to get to 6 in the loss zone. So we're down on 3 prizes. That Bucephalon is now activated. Whenever your opponent is on 3 prizes remaining, that's when you can use that attack. Spread some damage counters around. Could potentially take a KO on that Lucario, or again, set up some additional things for a later play with that Sableye. There goes a Psychic Energy to the discard. I believe they kept Lost Blender. That allows you to Lost Zone 2 cards from your hand, and then you draw a card. So they're currently at 6. They played Lost Vendor. That would get them to 8. Lost Vacuum would get them to 10. Question is, do they want to do that now, or do they want to potentially save that till later? Their hand size is starting to get very large, making it more and more tempting for our fighting player to use some kind of hand reset like Judge or Iono. Another energy going down on the Bucephalon. Likely going to be the attacker we're going to see this turn. Again, it is activated. You can only use that for a very limited time, so you want to use it when you can. Psychic player debating that Lost Blender. Again, going to be able to put 2 cards from their hand in the Lost Zone and then draw 1 card. Doesn't seem like the best trade-off until you realize that you've got some powerful payoffs in that Lost Mine, Sableye, Scoop Up Net, and Echoing Horn going to the discard. So we are up to 8 in the discard now. Our players are not keeping track of that very well with the dice, but we can count that. We've got 8 over there. So again, with that lost vacuum, they could get to 10 if they want to. So they got Hisuian Heavy Ball in hand. I'm not sure they've got any basics in their prizes, so that would be the perfect thing to be able to put in the lost zone with that lost vacuum. Player just debating if that's what they ultimately want to do. What I'll really be curious to see is ultimately how they decide to spread these damage counters with this Bicephalant. Again, I believe it's 6 damage counters, so it could take up the Lucario if our player wants to take a prize, though it might make more sense for them to spread some damage counters around to make that Lost Mine Sableye a little bit stronger on a subsequent turn. Is opting for the Rescue Stretcher, getting that Dusclops. Here we go, we're up to 8 in the Lost Zone. With that Dusclops back in play, again, that can potentially put another 5 damage somewhere. That could enable another KO. It really kind of comes down to, does our player want to put our opponent down to only 2 prizes remaining? Definitely starting to get a lot more dangerous. Getting that Mewtwo from the prizes, apparently they did have something in there that's going to allow them to be able to get a supporter back from the discard if they play that down onto the bench. Lots of choices with this Lost Zone deck. Always difficult to navigate this deck. Again, you're having to make tough choices. What do you want to put in the Lost Zone? You won't have access to those resources this game. But you do need to get to 10 somehow. It's like ultimately lost vacuuming the escape rope along with that Pokestop, so is now at 10. We're at the fun number. So there goes in. Both players having to shuffle their hands back into their deck. Then they will draw back up to their prizes. So only 3 prizes, or 3 cards for our fighting player, 5 for our psychic. Much better trade-off for our psychic player. Definitely one of the powers of the cards like in Iono. Great when you're playing from behind. It's one of the reasons why these spread decks like Lightning and Psychic are just so scary. They like playing from behind. So you're taking prizes, you're feeling good, but then you just get end or Iono'd into just nothing while your opponent still gets almost a full hand. So it looks like they're debating how to spread these damage counters around, putting some on Arcanine. I guess it allows you to put it 120. I was underestimating just how powerful that was. I thought it was only 6. But it does get a KO on that Lucario. Puts 6 more on that Hisuian Arcanine. So it's in KO range from that Sableye next turn. Rainbow Energy going down on that Excadrill. We'll put 10 damage on it. Muscle Band overcoming. So our player is actually accounting for the resistance here. Bicephalant has resistance of only 20 from fighting. So that Hisuian Arcanine is typically doing 120 damage, which would not be enough against this Bucephalant. That was a fantastic play from our fighting player, using the Rainbow Energy to put damage counters onto the bench, which activates Proud Fangs, has that Muscle Band, able to buff up that damage by just enough to get that KO. If they weren't able to do that turn, that could have really been a disaster. But getting that KO puts them right back in this game. 2 prizes to 4 really makes that Dusknoir a lot more scary for our Psychic player to use. If they did ultimately either use it here as the Dusclops or evolve it into Dusknoir and KO it, they'd put their opponent down to 1 prize. And if they're able to power something up and attack, then they would just lose the game. Donphan only attacks for 1 energy. Arcanine doesn't need any. Excadrill only needs 1 and it already has its energy. This is actually a pretty tough spot for our Psychic player. It could still go either way ultimately, but going to be a tough game to win for our Psychic player. Does have Tulip, so can get that Dusknoir as well as a couple Psychic energies back from the discard. It's going to potentially allow our Psychic player to take a KO What they might want to do here is maybe take a KO on the Excadrill and then use their Sableye to knock out the Phanpy. That would make it so Arcanine can't use that Proud Fangs. Not only would they take 2 prizes, but it would probably set them up the best to be the least likely to be KO'd by their opponent next turn. Psychic Energy does go down on Sableye. See what our Psychic player ultimately opts to do. Again, I do think that KOing that Excadrill with that Dusknoir and then the Phanpy probably makes the most sense. If you opt to take out the Arcanine instead, that would leave you open to potentially having that Donphan plus an energy go down and just getting the KO. But this is a very tough position. All right, it does look like blows that up, takes out that Excadrill. Both players take a prize. 1 prize remaining for our fighting player versus 3 for our psychic. They are going to take probably 1 more KO here, which will put them down to 2. But all right, getting rid of that muscle band as well. Don't want this thing doing any extra damage. Puts down the Shuppet. Potentially bench this Mewtwo as well, but it's looking like they're opting for Lost Mine. Not sure what they want to put down. This is a very difficult decision. Very important how they're going to take this attack. So is opting to, I think, KO the Phanpy, then putting the rest of the damage counters on this Arcanine. Yep, does take a prize, so Phanpy is going to go down. Then the rest of those are going to an Arcanine, so it'll be easy to KO next turn, assuming that our fighting player doesn't have a way to be able to take a KO this turn. Again, that Proud Fangs, like, you can use it, but it will only do 30 damage. It won't do that 120 because there's nothing on your bench with damage counters on it. The question is, can our fighting player find a way to potentially either be able to use Proud Fangs or power up this Hisuian Arcanine to use the second attack? That second attack would do 90 damage, though I believe Sableye does have, it does, yeah, it's got fighting resistance. So getting rid of that muscle band made sure that it couldn't be KO'd by that Scorching Flames. Excellent play by our Psychic player. Stadium Nav gets 2 stadiums. We already know Brooklet Hill is in the discard. I believe that was gone from the Pokestop earlier, so we'll see what other stadiums they've got. For the moment, still currently debating what they might want to grab. I believe that is, I don't remember what the name of the stadium is, but I think it buffs up the HP of stage 1s by 30. That actually makes a lot of sense in fighting. Fighting uses loss of stage 1s to attack, so if you can buff the HP a little bit, it could become relevant. Versus Seeker going down. What supporters do we have in the discard? Looks like we've got lots to debate here. Thought they were maybe going for that Karina, but I think they're just looking at all the supporter options that they've got. Question is, can any of those supporters actually help them win this turn, or at least make sure they don't lose once they pass back to their opponent? I think they opted for Clara. Unfortunately, the glare is stopping us from being able to see that. No, still debating. Or no, maybe they did select the Clara and now they're... Okay, yeah. They use the Clara, getting a couple Pokemon back, maybe some energy. Grabbing that Okidogi. Okidogi, a great choice here. Can't be KO'd by that Sableye. And if they can start powering that up, if they can manage to find a Dark Energy, then they would be able to get this Okidogi online and actually take that KO and win the game. Though they don't have that many cards in hand. Do they have what they need is the question. Okidogi goes down. They shouldn't bench that Phanpy. If they bench that Phanpy, it'll definitely be game. fighting energy going down on Okie Dokie, it looks like. Fighting player still just debating that. This is a tough spot for both of our players. They both know this is down to the wire. They've got 1, maybe 2 turns left. Player still does need to shuffle their deck ultimately. Uses Proud Fangs. Resistance cancels it out. And our player finally goes ahead and shuffle. Psychic draws for turn. Now having to contend with this Okie Dokie and this Hisuian Arcanine. They can take out the Arcanine this turn, but they've got no way to kill the Okie Dokie. They do have 4 cards in hand. If one of those is a Dark Energy, they just win next turn. All right, using that Mewtwo, putting in back on the top of the deck. That is the card that our player wants. They're using that Pokegear to look at the whole deck since they just have 2 cards grabbing in. So in will allow them to put their opponent down on 1 card. I believe that was Spell Tag going down on Sableye as well. Which, depending on how they spread their damage counters, might put them in a situation where they go to a sudden death. This is great play from our Psychic player. If they use that in, they'll put their opponent down to 1 card, which they will need to find that fighting energy, or I'm sorry, that dark energy to potentially win the game. But with no draw and 1 card, in goes down. Players are shuffling their hands back into their deck. Gonna draw 2 for our Psychic player, 1 for our fighting player. Psychic setting themselves up the best way that they can to potentially win this game. Going to be able to KO this Arcanine this turn and put a lot of damage counters on this Okie Dokie. Putting their opponent in a situation where they absolutely have to find that dark energy. Okay, so players actually ask for a judge shuffle here. I was sitting on hand watching this, and they were like, you know what? I don't want this in my hands. I don't want to cut myself into the loss here, so you shuffle for me. You can always ask a judge to shuffle for you. As long as you're not doing it in excess, it's perfectly fine for that to happen. Not sure what that was. I think it might have just been a repel. Even though I was sitting there, I actually don't remember exactly how this game ends. Looks like Lost Mine being activated. Taking the KO on this Arcanine. Up comes that Okie Dokie. 1 prize taken. We got 1-1. Does our player draws checking shoes? They find the unit energy. That is exactly what they needed. The judge shuffle does not pay off for our Psychic player. Able to get the KO. Spell Tag actually would have taken them to a sudden death, but because the Okie Dokie's ability is activated, it's got enough HP to be able to survive that. So yeah, just pointing that out to the players. So our Psychic player, again, did set themselves up the best they could. Judge Shuffle does not pay off. What an end to that game. Fantastic from both of our players. They really did everything they needed to try to win the game. Just didn't quite work out for our Psychic player. And that was our game. What an ending to that match. Our Psychic player really did everything they could to give themselves the best chance of winning. Even asked for the judge shuffle, but it does not pay off in the end. Fighting player takes the win for that game and completes a 4-0 run that week. Hope you enjoyed that game, and I will see you in the next one.